Police officers have read it. When was the last time someone you pulled over made you laugh and why? Not my story, but one my dad liked to tell. He was behind a car at a traffic light and noticed the driver seemed very nervous and kept glancing in the rearview mirror. It was a long light, so he had time to run the plate to check for any abnormalities. Sure enough, the driver had reasons to be nervous, as he had just stolen a shiny new sports car, and the marked police car behind him seemed to have figured this out. For whatever reason, Dad ended up in a lot of car chases in the 33 years as a cop and started carrying a helmet to keep from getting banged up as much. When the car came back stolen, he reached over, grabbed his helmet, put it on, and tied the chin strap. Expecting the guy was going to run as soon as the light turned green, he caught the driver looking back at his now crash-helmeted self and gave a huge grin indicating he was ready for an epic car chase. As soon as the light turned green, the driver went through the light and pulled over before Dad even turned on the lights and siren. When Dad got to the window and asked him why he pulled over, the driver said, "Sir, this car isn't mine, and honestly I was going to make a run for it, but when I saw you put a helmet on, I knew you meant business." Please tell me this cop has or had at the time a mustache, because I can't really imagine it any other way. Story 2. Best one I ever had. I remember it was about 10 or 11 at night. Not too early, but late enough that it was easy to catch speeders on the highway doing 30 to 40 over the limit. Speed limit was 90 kilometers per hour, and this vehicle is off in the distance, and I clock him at a zoomy 70 kilometers per hour. I think to myself that the only reason the vehicle is driving slow is due to impairment. I'm figuring out an easy impair charge. After pulling the vehicle over, I approach the driver, shine my light in, and see a very elderly gentleman. He looked at me and said something along the lines of, "Why did you pull me over? I know I wasn't speeding." I told him that I agreed with him, and after getting his license and vehicle registration, I told him I had pulled him over for going so slowly, and that I was worried he was impaired. There were no visible indications or odor of impairment. He let out a big smile and said that he hasn't had a drink in over 40 years. Upon asking him why he was driving so slowly, when with very little traffic on the road most vehicles speed, his response was this: "Son, it was my monthly model train meetup tonight, and it's the one night my wife lets me go out by myself. When you've been married for over 50 years, you appreciate the silence in private times. I'm in no rush to get back home." Story 3. I remember my friend and I were behind these factories that were near his childhood house. We always wanted to go back there and just look around. As we were down there, a cop car rolled up on us, and I immediately thought we were going to get in trouble for trespassing. The cop asks my friend what we were doing here and then points to the sign where it said "No trespassing." I was shocked at my friend's response. He began to speak Spanish to the cop, telling him that we were abiding by the law. He told the cop in fake broken English, "We are not in trouble, we have no trespassing. We only 2 people. Sign says no trespassing." I had to literally hold in laughter, but the cop burst out laughing and told us to go home. Another story. There's a homeless guy in my city who has a few mental issues. He's typically easy to deal with, so we normally leave him alone. But every now and then he will do something that warrants an arrest, or a trip to the hospital for a mental health evaluation. When he realizes that he's about to be arrested, the very first thing he does is take off his clothes. This guy is about 5'2" and has absolutely the largest jimmy any of us have ever seen. He'll then run to the street and dance with his jimmy flopping all over the place while the cops try to take him into custody. He'll even occasionally drop a poop during the process. Most of the officers who have some time will do anything to avoid him, or send the rookies to do the duty work. Well, getting into your birthday suit is the best deterrent, I guess. Who would want to arrest a homeless dude without anything on? Not me. Not in a million years. Story 4. To set the scene, at a previous employer, our main data center was about 10 minutes up the road from the office. Trips between the two were commonplace, we all ran back and forth frequently. This day we were having a connectivity issue to an entire rack of gear, and I was flying over to the data center to troubleshoot. There was construction between the office and DC, and it had been there for weeks at this point. Fines are doubled in the construction zones in the state I live in, and I'm usually careful to not speed in them because those tickets are expensive. Because I was mentally reviewing why we were down and in a hurry, I failed to see the motorcycle cop sitting dead center of the construction zone with his radar gun pointed in my direction until I was in the 3rd gear and 10 over the posted limit, which was 20 over the construction zone limit. He nailed me and we both knew it. Since I knew he was coming, I just pulled over into the next parking lot and he came in behind me. Damn, 30 over in a construction zone. This is gonna suck. I grabbed my paperwork out of the glove box and waited for him to do his preliminary check before he came to talk to me. As he walked up, I greeted him by saying, "Hello, officer. I'm an idiot, aren't I?" He stared at me for a quick second, like he was trying to maintain his composure and just couldn't do it. Started chuckling and then, after a couple of seconds, burst into these deep belly laughs. Probably laughed for a good 30 seconds before he responded, "Well, just remember, those are your words, not mine." I admitted to the offense, but asked if he could please get me back on my way quickly because I had this fire going on at work. He was really cool about it. He still wrote me a speeding ticket, but it was for 11 over, and he put the location as an intersection that was past the construction zone. That was about $900 less in fines I'd be potentially facing, and made it an infraction I could take traffic school for instead of paying the fine. Super awesome guy. Another time I blew by a cop once, probably doing like 30 miles per hour over the speed limit in the back road. As soon as I blew by him, I knew I was in a whole lot of trouble, but it was also a hilly road, so I didn't actually see him pull out. But again, I knew I was lagged, so I just pulled over and waited. Like 5 minutes later, the cop dolls up behind me and his siren and lights on. When he came up to the window, I just immediately said, "I'm sorry, officer, I was super over the limit there, and that's my fault." And he was just like, "Why'd you pull over? You probably could have lost me pretty easily." Well, I knew I was speeding and I knew you were going to pull me over, so I figured I'd just make it easier on both of us. Then he told me how I was the only person ever who had pulled themselves over for him and to slow down next time on that road. Story 5. Not a cop, but I made one laugh once I knew I was a little too buzzed and laying in the sidewalk in a bar district. "Son, what exactly do you think you're doing right here?" As he taps my shoulder with his boot. "Hopefully I'm reminding you of someone else you like because this is just the worst first impression." He laughed and helped me find some Gatorade and my friends instead of arresting me for public intoxication. "So, Officer Brian, if you're out there, things are going much better and thanks for being cool with me when things were just starting to get better." Another instance, a few friends and I go out for a buddy's 25th birthday, and he proceeds to get rickety wrecked. I'm talking like doesn't know his own name wrecked. So we lost him, Josh is gone. The next evening I get a phone call, and it's Josh. Apparently he had left the bar, wandered for a while, found a construction site, and fallen asleep on a stack of plywood. He was awakened by a nudge to the shoulder, and he jumps up, still super drunk, and there's a cop standing beside him. The cop asks him, "Son, what the hell are you doing? It's dangerous to be sleeping out here, especially in this part of town." Josh is standing there in khakis and a button-down shirt, but he's clearly still inebriated. He bends over, picks up a hard hat, puts it on and says, "I'm just early for work." The cop bursts out laughing and lets him call a friend to pick him up. Story 6. I'm not a cop, probably closer to criminal, but one night about 6 years ago, I had a local cop near pissing himself. I was walking home from the pub one night when I decided I'd rather get some snacks and call a taxi. I walk up to a gas or convenience store and open the door. I noticed no one was at the cash, so figured they were in the bathroom. I grab a sandwich, some chips, and a giant piece of beef jerky and go to the checkout. I call out hello a couple of times, then jump out of my skin when the alarm starts to go off. I panic and start to run out the door, then I stop and grab my food, then I say to myself, "Wait, I haven't actually done anything." So I pull out my cell phone and call 911. Hello, 911? I think I accidentally broke into the Ultramar. About 10 minutes later, the police show up and cuff me and begin searching the entire area. One cop stayed with me and I told him I didn't actually do anything, but he just says he'll be the judge of that when the manager arrives to review the security cameras. Well, she shows up and is a total witch. I don't think she liked being woken up at 3 a.m. Well, the cop comes out of the office laughing so hard he's crying and cuffs me and apologizes, then gives me a ride home and a trip to a drive-thru. I have 2 questions. First, did he get his food though? And second, have you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel? Because if you haven't, it'll give you some time to do that right now. Done. Let's get back to the video then. Story 7. I was flagged down by a random motorist. I contacted the driver and he advised me there was a gentleman running out into the street and throwing rocks at cars near the water tower. I advised the radio and requested the county to respond since it would be on a county road. I approached the area and didn't see any pedestrians in the road or anyone throwing rocks. However, I did see a lady parked on the shoulder making what appeared to be a frantic phone call. I pull up next to her and ask if she had seen the rock thrower. She advised she did and pointed at another roadway. But this time county shows up and we both proceed in the direction the second motorist advised. The deputy and I make a right turn and sure enough, there he is, bare, with his boxers down around his ankles, standing square in the middle of the road. The deputy and I exit our cars and start walking towards the guy. As I'm walking, I noticed a pair of blue jeans entangled in a barbed wire fence to my left. It would seem he attempted to climb the barbed wire fence but got hung up and gave up on the lower half of his Canadian tuxedo. The deputy and I quickly took him into custody and asked him why he was running around in the roadway scaring the local citizens. He says, "What would you do if a gay guy gave you a bunch of money?" I had no answer, so I then asked him if he was under the influence of any substance and he explained, "Family issues." I got a good laugh out of it. Story 8. Policeman here. I'm usually really busy with criminal investigations, so don't do much traffic enforcement. When I do, it's usually looking for impaired drivers. A few stories that I found funny. Pulled over a vehicle with a male registered owner, walled up and started with, "Hello, sir." The lady turned to me insulted and I did a double take. She had a close-knit gray hat on that looked totally like a man's gray hair. When I walked up, my impression was an elderly man as she was really thin. When she looked at me though, nope, definitely not an old man. Another time I said hello sir to a lady who had a lumberjack shirt and buzz cut. Oops. No harm meant, honestly. When I'm approaching a vehicle, I'm looking for 3 cues. Are you reaching for hidden things? Are you hiding things? Things like gender ID get relegated to the back parts of my brain, I guess. I pulled over a vehicle for swerving all over the road really late at night once and walked up to the door. The driver was angry as a bee, telling me he was sure he wasn't speeding, in a very animated way. I smiled at him and waited until he was done. After a few minutes, it seemed like, he noticed I wasn't saying anything and stopped talking, looking kind of puzzled. I laughed and said I know you weren't speeding, I was just wondering if you were drunk. In his animated monologue, I could tell he wasn't intoxicated. We ended up chatting for a few minutes by the side of the road. He was driving home from his work in another province and was almost home. Good de-escalation technique, by the way. Just smile and wait till they run out of steam, even if it takes 2 minutes, then ask them what's going on. People feel heard and listened to, and you get to hear their side of the story. If you end up having to arrest them later, they usually treat you with the same respect you treat them with. Yesterday, I was following a car on the highway going 80 kilometers per hour and at 100 kilometers per hour, and 70, 60, 50, so I put in my lights and pulled her over. She had a small Pontiac Sunfire completely filled with garbage. There was a little spot for her to sit and see out the back seat, and passenger seat was filled almost to the roof with every type of garbage imaginable. She said that my lights were so bright, said she couldn't see, so that's why she kept slowing down. I was just worried she was having mechanical issues with her vehicle. The other day, I pulled someone over with no insurance, expired registration by 5 months, and an expired license. I towed her vehicle, explaining you need all 3 of those to drive on highways in her province. She was just aghast that I would tow her. She kept saying, "Seriously? You're going to tow me?" She was a young blonde and I think expected to flirt her way out of the ticket. I know the internet is awash with stories of cops giving breaks to pretty girls, but come on. If your loved one was hit by someone without insurance, what would you think if a cop let them go minutes earlier knowing they were uninsured? Okay, totally off topic, but another great de-escalation technique is talking really quietly. I'm amazed at how good this works with people, both in custody and not. If someone is having an emotional outburst or has a lot of anger directed towards you, stay calm, speak softly, and they stop yelling to hear what you're saying. I suggest trying it when you're dealing with irate people. Story 9. I was driving home from college with my kitten on my lap, who usually just sleeps while we're driving. Of course, I get pulled over and the officer comes up to the window and does all the pleasantries, and I start to say how sorry I am when my kitty starts meowing and sticks his head in the window and only stops when the cop pets him. The cop started laughing and told me how lucky I was to have him, then let me go with a warning. My buddy got a cop to laugh pretty hard once. We got pulled over. He was driving a car he had picked up at a police auction. The car was missing the VIN and the dash, so the cop put him in cuffs and in the back of the car and had me stand behind it till he could clear everything. Out of nowhere, my buddy starts screaming and banging his head in the seat. Cop looks at me and asks what my buddy is on. I say nothing as he doesn't even drink. Turns out a spider started crawling across the back of the seat towards my friend who was terrified of them. He freaked out and could only think of killing it with his head. Once we figured out what was going on, the cop had a good laugh at him. Then the cop impounded his car and left us on the side of the road, so I guess it still wasn't enough. Lol. Would have probably did the same. Spiders freak me out, man. Like, really freak me out. There's just this feeling you have when you think of them crawling on you. Story 10. Remembered a good one. I saw someone not wearing their seatbelt driving by them. I turned around real quick and pulled them over. I don't like giving them the tickets unless, number 1, I make eye contact with them, driving next to them, and then point to their seatbelt and they have this oh moment, or number 2, get up to the window quicker than they can put it on. Otherwise, they put it on and think they can sit there and lie about it to your face even though you're not stupid. Well, I was going with tactic 2, which isn't the safest tactic in the world because you should always be cautious when approaching a vehicle in a stop. I got up pretty quickly to the side of an obese woman struggling to get the belt around her waist and yelling frantically. I stop her and say, "Ma'am, having trouble?" She replied, "I'm too fat to wear the freaking thing." Laughed pretty hard, but felt bad afterwards. I asked her how much she weighed, made a note in my notebook and gave her the ticket and told her to plead not guilty. Knowing that traffic court is seriously delayed in my area, I told her that if she loses 10 pounds by the court date, I'll take a dive during my testimony of the ticket. She lost 20 and turned her life around. Don't really know if she wears her seatbelt all the time, but I like to think that it was still worth my discretion to do that. Update, I didn't know I'd get so much backlash. The woman said she was too fat to obey the traffic law. Discretionary powers are in place because you don't need to throw the book at every single person. I believed motivating her to lose weight would not only add years to her life, but allow her to wear seatbelt in the future. There's no way of knowing whether or not that was going to happen from the initial traffic stop, so I had to give her the ticket and come back to court to see if she followed through on our deal. I wasn't pilfing her for a court shot. I was seeing if she was lying to me about how her weight inhibits her from following the law and whether or not she actually regretted and wished she could. That's why a cop may or may not write you a ticket. The majority of people don't take vehicle safety seriously without consequence. Story 11. Not a cop. After spending a weekend at a friend's house in Wisconsin, I get in my big old beater to drive 2 hours back to Chicago. I was pretty young, probably 21, and had left the car sitting under a tree with the windows open all weekend. It was nice weather. Anyway, I leave for home kind of late, around 11 or 12 p.m. At the time, it was common knowledge that the Wisconsin cops loved to give out tickets. Everyone had a story about those guys, and it wasn't pleasant. So I'm driving alone, minding my own business on a pretty empty expressway when I start hearing a buzzing noise, as in a bee buzzing. It comes and goes at first, but gradually gets louder and louder and sounds like it's multiplying. I look around at the back seat quickly, but can't see anything. Then I start feeling something in my hair. I look in the rearview mirror and start seeing these gigantic bees flying around. It was horrifying. I pushed my seat up to as close to the steering wheel as possible and put the pedal to the metal. That old car could fly. It must have been going 100 miles per hour. I kept looking for a place to pull over, but there was nothing. No gas station, diner, nothing. And I knew if I just pulled over on the shoulder, I'd never get back in the car with the giant killer bees. Eventually, I realized there are 3 squad cars after me. I couldn't see their lights because my face was practically touching the windshield, plus I was in full panic mode. One of them drove up beside me yelling with his bullhorn to pull over, which I gladly did, even though I was sure I'd be thrown in the slammer. When I stopped, I shot at the car like a cannon, yelling about the bees. They were very stern at first. Like, do you know how long we've been following you and how fast you were going? I guess I had the right answers because they eventually looked inside the car and it was loaded with June bugs. Turns out they don't sting, but they are big. And bless those guys. They got every single one out of my car and did not give me a ticket. They were laughing about how it was a first for them. Such nice guys. You should be careful next time. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. Cops, what's your best? Nope, not worth it. Story. Story 2 is definitely not worth it. See you in that video.